The snow was falling harder than usual in Winterfell, as if the old gods were warning something dark in the winds. Jon Snow stood near the godswood tree, the red leaves whispering tales of blood and betrayal. But this time he was not alone. Beside him stood Robb Stark, the young wolf, tired from the war, but fiercer than ever. They had both received word, days ago, from a source trusted deeply. Roose Bolton planned to betray them, not just with letters to Tywin Lannister, but with knives at a feast. Jon had ridden from the wall on a secret path, using the excuse of arranging mission beyond Castle Black. No one knew. Not Sam, not Lord Commander Mormont, just Ghost and Robb, who met him in the shadows of Deepwood Motte. There was no time to waste. The war in the south had turned messy. Catelyn was uneasy, and whispers from the Dreadfort had grown louder, darker. They flay their enemies alive, Jon said, gripping Longclaw tight. But they forget the North remembers. Robb looked ahead, his eyes colder than the snow itself. We end House Bolton tonight, they moved quickly. With a small force of men they trusted, Great Jon Umber, Mage Mormont, even Sir Wendell Manderley, they planned a raid on Dreadfort under the cover of a false truce. A peace meeting to reclaim unity in the North. That's what the Ravens said. But in truth it was bait, and Roose Bolton took it. Walton Rose's bastard was left behind in the Dreadfort. Jon knew what the bastard of Bolton was capable of. He'd heard tales, hunting women in forests, feeding them to dogs. Jon promised himself if they caught him, he'd not die easy. The meeting was set in a half-broken holdfast near the last river. Robb and Roose arrived with equal numbers. They spoke of banners and broken loyalties, of Lannisters and Freys. But beneath the table, swords were already drawn. Then it happened. Jon stepped from the shadows. A blade to Rose's throat. You swore to House Stark, Jon said, his voice steady. You swore before gods and men. Roose didn't blink. And men break oaths, he replied calmly, trying to act untouched. Just like your brother broke his, when he married that girl of no name. Before he could say another word, Robb slammed his dagger into Rose's stomach. He coughed blood, stared at Robb in disbelief. The North remembers, Robb whispered in his ear, and now it answers. Panic broke out. Swords clashed. But Robb's forces were prepared. Bolton men, once feared, were cut down like rats. No honor in their deaths, only justice. Harsh, cold, northern justice. By dawn, the meeting place was drenched in red. Roose Bolton was dead. His body fed to the crows. The traitor's head sent to the Dreadfort with a note. Your father is dead. The Stark wolf bites back. Back in the Dreadfort, Ramsay Snow read the note with bloodlust in his eyes. He laughed, a dry, cruel laugh, and whispered to himself, now the game begins. But he didn't know. Jon and Robb were already on their way to him, and they weren't planning to leave the bastard breathing. Snow fell like silent ash over the north, smothering the land in a white hush that couldn't hide the fury marching beneath it. Jon rode ahead, Ghost padding beside his black horse like a pale shadow. Robb Stark, taller, broader now after 2 years of war, rode silently at his side, his direwolf grey wind moving like a ghost of vengeance. Behind them, 200 hand-picked men from northern houses followed, grim, loyal and cold with purpose. The road to the Dreadfort was long and cruel. Villages once protected under Stark banners now sat half-burned, their people starved or slaughtered. The Boltons had ruled like butchers, not lords. Women flayed for rumors, old men killed for not kneeling fast enough. Every town they passed whispered the same fear. The bastard has taken after his father. Only worse, Jon saw it in their eyes. No one wept for Roose, but everyone trembled at the thought of Ramsay. They reached the woods near the Dreadfort by nightfall. The black towers of that cursed place loomed ahead, sharp and angry against the cloudy sky. Ramsay hadn't sent any ravens, not yet, but scouts had returned. The flayed bodies of their messengers were nailed to trees half a mile out. One had no skin on his face, but his eyes had been left intact, frozen open in horror. He's mocking us, Robb muttered. Trying to rattle us, Jon didn't reply. He stared ahead at the distant walls of the Dreadfort. He wants us to come in angry, not smart. That night they set camp beneath the hill's curve. John paced outside the tents while Ghost stood watch. He couldn't sleep, not with what he'd seen, not with what he remembered. He remembered Theon's stories from Winterfell, the screams echoing in the night. Ramsay's smile when he cut, how he enjoyed it. Even the Lannisters didn't take this kind of pleasure in cruelty. Ramsay wasn't just a threat to the north. He was a sickness that had to be cut out. Inside the tent, Robb sat sharpening his sword. Grey Wind lay nearby, tail twitching. "I keep wondering," he said after a long silence, "if I hadn't married Talisa, if I had just listened to Mother." John shook his head. "You'd still have betrayed Walder Frey. He would have turned on you either way." "He only needed an excuse." Robb looked up. "And Bolton?" "He always planned to betray you," John replied, sitting across from him. It was in his blood. He wanted Winterfell. Always did. Robb's eyes turned hard. "Then let's see how badly he wants it now." At dawn, the battle began. They split into 3 groups. John led the vanguard from the west gate, Robb from the north. The third, a band of archers, climbed a hidden trail once used by poachers. The plan was simple: surround, starve, and storm, but Ramsay had other plans. As John's group approached the outer gate, a banner dropped from the Dreadfort's wall. Not the flayed man of House Bolton, but a banner soaked in blood with Grey Wind's silhouette drawn in guts. John froze. "He's taunting Robb." Then the screams began. From the walls, flaming barrels were launched, smashing into the snow. Men screamed as fire caught their cloaks, igniting tents. But worse than fire were the hounds. A pack of monstrous beasts, starved and enraged, released through secret tunnels in the fort. The dogs fell upon the rear line, dragging men down, tearing flesh from bone. One soldier managed to stab a beast in the eye. Another lost his throat before he even turned. John charged forward, slashing down a mutt that lunged at a boy barely 18. "Archers!" he roared. "Bring them down from the walls." Arrows flew, but Ramsay's archers fired back. It wasn't a battle. It was a blood sport, and Ramsay was hunting them all. Then came the laughter. From the ramparts, Ramsay appeared. Cloaked in black, hair wild, face smeared with fresh blood, he looked more like a demon than a man. "Brother of Snow," he called out mockingly. "Come to rescue the North, or to die like your father?" John raised Longclaw, firelight dancing along the Valyrian steel. "I'm coming for your head," Ramsay grinned. "Then come and try, bastard." Behind John, Robb's horn blew, the signal to storm the walls. The siege had begun, but no one, not even Robb or John, truly understood what awaited them inside the Dreadfort. Not just death, not just war, something darker. The horns howled again, long and loud, echoing through the frozen hills like a call from the old gods themselves. The stark banners surged forward, snow crunching beneath boots and hooves as the North answered its call for vengeance. John led his men straight at the western gate, Ghost leaping over fallen bodies and biting through enemy throats like a white streak of death. The gate wasn't unguarded. Ramsay had stationed crossbowmen in every tower slit, and boiling oil already simmered atop the battlements. But John knew this would happen. He wasn't here to knock. He was here to break the door down. Behind him, Sir Wendell Manderley and Great John Umber marched with their units, carrying the battering ram, an old oak log reinforced with steel and carved into the shape of a wolf's head. It smashed against the wooden gates with a deafening crack once, twice, a third time, and splinters flew like arrows. Arrows rained from above, one slicing past John's cheek. Another struck the soldier beside him in the chest, knocking him back into the snow, where his blood began to steam. But John didn't flinch. He could feel it. The Dreadfort was cracking, not just at the gate, but from within. Meanwhile, on the north side, Robb Stark had already breached the outer wall using the hidden Sally Gate, a small door near the kennels that Theon had once mentioned before everything went wrong. Robb's group was smaller but quicker, and Grey Wind led the charge like a demon loosed from hell. They swept through the courtyard, cutting down Boltons in a swift, ruthless flurry, but it was too easy, too quiet. Robb stepped over a body. The man hadn't even drawn his sword. Another soldier was found strangled in a hallway, eyes bulging. The doors inside the keep were open. Torches still burned. No resistance. Robb turned to Lady Mage Mormont. "Where is he?" She frowned. "He's luring you. Same as his father did, but filthier. That's when the screams started, but not from the battlefield, from inside the keep." Robb kicked down the door to the great hall and froze. There, hung from meat hooks like cattle, were children, barely clothed, their faces carved with Bolton sigils. Some were still breathing. A girl tried to scream, but only a wheeze escaped her. Someone had taken her tongue. Robb staggered back, bile rising in his throat. "Gods, what is this?" A voice echoed above them, almost gleeful. "Guests! You're just in time for dinner." Ramsay appeared on the balcony above, arms outstretched, shirtless, his chest smeared in blood like war paint. "You wanted the Dreadfort? Take it!" Every stone soaked in history, every hall echoing with pain. Robb didn't speak. He simply lifted his sword. Ramsay's smile widened. "Oh, no. You've come all this way, Brother Wolf. Let me make this interesting." With a snap of his fingers, the floor beneath the children dropped, and they vanished into darkness, screaming as chains dragged them into the pits below. Robb charged up the steps, but Ramsay vanished like smoke through a hidden door. Back on the west side, John and his group had broken through the gates. Bodies littered the courtyard now, but the air smelled of rot, not just blood. As John moved toward the central keep, Ghost growled, deep and low, his hackles rising. Something was wrong. He turned the corner and found 3 stark men dead, but not by sword, by traps. One had fallen into a spiked pit. Another was hanging from a wire that had snapped his neck. The third had a crossbow bolt through his eye, the weapon rigged to fire when a door opened. John cursed under his breath. "He's turned the castle into a slaughterhouse." Just then a soldier came limping down the corridor, covered in burns, face half melted. He's underneath," the man gasped. "He's taken the lower dungeons, turned them into gods, into games." John helped him down. "Where's Robb?" The man coughed blood. "Already inside, but he's not alone. Ramsay has him right where he wants him." John stood. His heart thundered in his chest, not from fear but rage. He looked at Ghost, who snarled in agreement. "We end this, now." As he entered the great hall, the stench hit him first, not just blood, but burning flesh, wet straw, and the unmistakable stink of madness. The place looked like a temple for the insane, bones scattered like leaves, limbs nailed to the walls like trophies. Ramsay's artwork, but there, at the end of the corridor, John saw it. Robb's sword, lying on the floor beside a darkened stairwell leading down. A trail of blood marked the path, and John followed. The staircase was narrow, damp, and stank of rot. John moved down carefully, Longclaw drawn, Ghost padding behind him with quiet fury in his eyes. The torches lining the walls flickered, as if afraid to stay lit in this place. The deeper he went, the colder it got, not the cold of snow or ice, but the kind of cold that seeps into your bones when something unnatural is near. The trail of blood was fresh, smeared along the stone walls in shaky, dragging patterns. John's grip on his sword tightened. Somewhere beneath the Dreadfort, Ramsay was waiting. And Robb was hurt. He reached the dungeon's first level. Cells lined the corridor, small, filthy cages built more for dogs than men. In one, a man without legs sobbed softly. In another, a woman cradled what looked like a bundle of cloth, until John saw the small, lifeless arm hanging from it. He forced himself to look away. "Robb," he called softly, but only silence answered. Ghost let out a low growl. They pressed deeper. The corridor opened into a wide chamber, circular, carved out crudely with torches lighting the walls. In the center stood a wooden chair bolted to the floor. Leather straps dangled from the arms, and above it dozens of knives, hooks, flaying tools, all clean, all waiting. On the far side of the chamber, someone was tied to a pillar. Blood dripped from his hands. His head hung low, auburn hair matted with sweat and blood. "Robb." John rushed forward, but as he neared, he heard a laugh echo from the shadows, slow, mocking, familiar. You came, brother, Ramsay purred from the dark. You always do. Just like the good little bastard, always cleaning up after the family. John spun around, eyes scanning the gloom. Ramsay stepped into the torchlight, bare-chested, arms slick with blood that wasn't his. His smile was wide, animalistic. In one hand he held a curved blade. In the other, a torch John raised Longclaw. Let him go. Ramsay cocked his head. Why would I ruin such beautiful art? You should have seen how your noble brother screamed when I cut behind the knee. Not the front, too expected. But the back? Oh, the nerves there sing. I'll kill you, John said, voice low. Ramsay laughed. You and every Stark I've ever met. So much honor, so little imagination. Ghost leapt at him with a snarl, but Ramsay was fast. He threw the torch at the direwolf, forcing Ghost to dodge as he slipped into a side passage like a rat. John didn't hesitate. He ran to Robb and untied him. His brother was half-conscious, whispering something John couldn't understand. Robb, it's me, John said, gently lifting him. I've got you. We're getting out. Robb's swollen eyes opened slowly. He's not done, trap. More below. John's blood ran cold. He looked around. Ghost sniffed the ground, growling at a nearby grate, a hole in the floor with a ladder leading further down. More screams echoed from within. Screams John recognized. Northern voices, prisoners, soldiers, maybe even villagers. Ramsay hadn't just tortured Robb, he'd collected people. John hesitated. Robb was in no state to move. But if he left now, those screams would never stop. Robb grabbed his wrist. Don't. Let him keep them, John nodded. He helped Robb to the wall, sitting him down safely. I'll come back. You hold on. With Ghost at his side, John descended into the black pit below. The lower level was worse. A maze of cages, torture chambers, and bone-covered floors. Flickering lanterns cast dancing shadows along blood-soaked walls. One room was filled with flayed corpses hung like meat in a butcher's shop. Another had paintings, not of colors, but of blood finger-painted by someone insane. And then, the sounds. Ramsay singing off-key, childish, a northern lullaby. John turned the corner and found him standing in a shallow pool of water, barefoot humming as he carved something into the stone wall. You came, Ramsay whispered, without turning. Did he beg for you? Did he cry? John didn't answer. He charged, but Ramsay was ready. He turned, slashing wildly. The two collided, blades flashing in the dark. Longclaw met the curve of Ramsay's dagger again and again. Ramsay was fast, slippery, like fighting a shadow made of spite. You think this ends with me, Jon Snow? Ramsay hissed, dodging a strike. The North is broken. Just like your name. You're nothing. A mistake. Jon slammed his fist into Ramsay's face, breaking his nose. Blood sprayed. Ramsay stumbled. That mistake, Jon growled, is about to kill you. One final swing, and Longclaw buried deep into Ramsay's chest. The Valyrian steel cutting through ribs and heart like it was paper. Ramsay's mouth opened, a small laugh escaping as blood bubbled from his lips. Then silence. Jon stood over him, chest heaving, blade dripping. Ghost approached and sat beside the body. No growl, just calm. It was done. The cold wind hit Jon like a slap as he climbed out of the dungeons with Robb, half-conscious over his shoulder. Behind him, Ghost padded silently, blood matted on his white fur, eyes still alert. The torchlight from above was growing stronger now. It wasn't just firelight, it was daylight. They had fought through the night. As Jon stepped into the courtyard of the Dreadfort, the sun broke through the clouds, casting its pale gold across the stone. For a moment, it felt like a breath. A single breath of peace after drowning in madness. Stark banners now waved from the towers. The flayed man of House Bolton had been torn down and burned. Robb stirred in Jon's arms, coughing hard. You did it, he croaked, voice barely a whisper. Tell me it's over. Jon looked around. Mage Mormont was directing men to clear the bodies. The Umbers had started tending to the wounded. Prisoners from the dungeons, gaunt, wounded, and broken, were being brought into the open air. Some weeping just from seeing the sky again. It's over, Jon said. Not sure if it was the truth or just something Robb needed to hear. He carried Robb into the great hall, now cleared of Ramsay's grotesque trophies. The floor still stank of blood and burnt flesh, but it was theirs now. No more screaming, no more traps. A healer met them inside. "We've set up a room upstairs," she said. "He's lost a lot of blood." John nodded and handed his brother over reluctantly. Robb gripped his arm before they pulled him away. Don't let them call this a victory," Robb muttered. "Burn this place when we're done. Salt the stones." John's jaw tightened. "I will." He turned and walked back outside. By midday, the bodies of Ramsay's hounds had been piled in the yard, monstrous beasts, their mouths still twisted in hunger, even in death. The heads of Bolton loyalists were mounted on spikes along the outer wall. A warning to anyone who still believed in that cursed house. John found Wyman Manderley near the kennels, overseeing the burial of Northern soldiers. The Lord looked older than he had a month ago. Grief wore heavy on all of them. "Any survivors from the lower pits?" John asked. Manderley shook his head.
33 alive.
"Some won't walk again. Some won't speak again. But they're free." John nodded, but his face remained stone. He wandered toward the rear of the Dreadfort, where smoke still rose from the pyres. That's where they'd burned Ramsay's body, not with honor, not with rights, but with fury. They'd tied his corpse to a wooden stake, poured oil, and let the flames take him while soldiers watched in silence. Ghost had stayed the whole time, unmoving, as if waiting for the soul to leave before turning away. Even in death, Ramsay's presence clung to the walls. John could feel it, like a shadow you can't quite shake off. It wasn't just the man. It was what he'd created. The pain, the games, the way the Dreadfort had become a symbol of fear, not just for enemies, but for the North itself. At dusk, Robb called for him. John entered the chamber. Robb was lying on a bed of furs, arm bandaged, legs splintered, eyes sunken but alive. "I heard what you did," he said softly. "The dungeons. The people." John sat beside him. "They were his trophies." Robb looked away, guilt creeping into his face. "I should have ended the Boltons the day they flayed that Karstark rider. I thought we could still keep the North united." "The North doesn't unite with monsters," John replied coldly. "We're not the South. We don't smile at traitors and seat them in castles," Robb sighed. "And what now?" John stood, pacing slowly. "We bury our dead? We send word to every house. The Boltons are finished. The Dreadfort is no longer theirs. Then we burn it." Robb raised an eyebrow. "All of it?" John nodded. "All of it, brick by brick. No place like this should stand. Not after what he did. Let it be a warning and a grave." Outside, the men prepared for the burning. Oil barrels were rolled in, timbers smashed, the great doors torn from their hinges. John watched in silence, Ghost beside him, as the flames caught. At first, the fire was slow, but then it roared. The Dreadfort, home of flayed men, screams and shadows, finally lit up like the hell it had been. Black smoke twisted into the sky, and the snow around it melted from the heat, forming rivers of ash and soot. The North remembered, and now the North was reborn. The Dreadfort burned for 2 days and 2 nights. Smoke curled into the sky like a serpent, black against the pale grey clouds, visible from miles away. Villagers whispered that even the old gods had turned their eyes to the fire, watching the home of flayers and traitors crumble into soot. In the North, where memory ran deep and grudges ran deeper, the fall of House Bolton became a legend by the third sunrise. But Jon Snow didn't feel like a victor. He stood on a ridge overlooking the ruins, the bitter wind biting at his face. Ghost sat at his side, silent as ever. Below them, men worked in grim silence, digging graves for the dead and tending to the wounded. The banners of the Stark direwolf flew high, but Jon knew what lay behind them: exhaustion, grief, and too many unanswered questions. He hadn't slept much since the fire started, not because of the cold or the noise, but because every time he closed his eyes, he saw Ramsay's grin, bloody and unrepentant. That smile would haunt the North for a long time. Behind him, footsteps approached, heavy, limping. It was Robb. Wrapped in a thick fur cloak, his wounds bandaged, he leaned on a carved cane. The healers had begged him to rest longer, but Robb Stark had never been the kind to sit still while his people bled. "Burned well, didn't it?" Robb said, staring at the charred remains. Jon gave a slow nod. "Better than it deserved." There was a long silence between them, filled only by the wind. "I owe you my life, Jon," Robb said at last, voice rough. "Not just for pulling me out of that dungeon. For stopping what I couldn't." Jon didn't answer right away. He stared at the smoke and said, "We both should have seen what the Boltons were." Robb exhaled sharply, a bitter smile on his face. "Aye, but you acted. And now the North stands." Jon looked at him. "For how long?" That question lingered heavier than the ash in the air. Robb turned toward him fully. "That's why I asked you up here." Jon raised a brow. "You're not about to ask me to go south again, are you?" Robb chuckled weakly, then winced. "No, not south, home." Jon blinked. Robb's eyes were serious now. "I want you in Winterfell with me. Not as my bastard brother. Not as a Night's Watch deserter. But as my equal." Jon's throat tightened. "You know I can't—" "You can," Robb cut in. "I've already sent a raven to the wall. I've explained everything. You didn't desert. You came to save the North, and you did. You never broke your vows." Jon looked away. "The old men in black won't see it that way. They will when they see your sword in the snow and your blood spilled for them," Robb said. "And even if they don't, I'm the king in the North. I'll pardon you myself." Jon shook his head slowly. "And then what? You name me lord or something? Give me a castle, a wife. If that's what it takes to make you stay," Robb said softly. Yes, the words hit Jon like a blade. All his life he dreamed of being something more than a snow, more than the silent shadow of House Stark. But now, faced with the offer, with acceptance, he felt hollow. "I'm not sure I belong there, Robb," Jon said finally. "I've seen things on the wall. I've fought dead men, monsters. And now Ramsay—" He trailed off, unable to say more. Robb placed a hand on his shoulder. "You belong with your people, and they need you. I can't do this alone. The war isn't over. The South still holds Winterfell in stories, and the Lannisters won't forget that we've grown stronger. If we want to keep the North free, we'll need more than soldiers. We'll need each other." Jon stared at the ruins one last time, then down at the valley where freed prisoners were being fed and clothed. He could feel it. Something changing. Not just in the North, but in himself. He wasn't a boy in black anymore. He wasn't a bastard hiding in the shadows. He was a Stark, in blood, if not in name. And now, in purpose, he looked at Robb and gave the faintest nod. "I'll stay." "For now," Robb smiled. The first true smile Jon had seen from him in months. "That's all I ask, brother." The two turned back toward the camp. Walking side by side, two wolves, scarred but unbroken, ready to rebuild what was nearly lost, but neither of them saw the black-feathered raven watching them from the trees, or the silent rider heading south, because while the North burned the past, the South had already begun planning revenge. The raven arrived at Harrenhal 2 days later, wings black as shadow, eyes gleaming with a glint of cold news. Inside the smoky, half-broken great hall, Walder Frey squinted at the parchment, lips twitching in disbelief. His gnarled fingers gripped the scroll so hard that it tore halfway down the middle. The crackling fire beside him did little to warm the growing chill in his bones. "Rose is dead," he muttered, eyes narrowing. "Ramsay too." His sons stood around the table, shifting uneasily. Black Walder crossed his arms. "The North burned the Dreadfort, father. And now they're rallying behind Robb Stark again. They say Jon Snow is with him." "Jon Snow?" Walder spat, the words tasting like vinegar. "Another Stark bastard with delusions of grandeur. How many wolves must we kill before they learn to stay in the ground?" "Apparently one more," sneered Ryman Frey, slapping a goblet off the table. "We should have finished the damn job at the Twins. Why did we ever trust a Bolton?" Walder wheezed a dry, bitter laugh. "Because Roose was a snake who hated other snakes, and he had no love for the Starks. But now he's rotting in a ditch with his son, and we've got a pack of howling wolves back on our doorstep." A messenger entered quickly, bowing his head. "A raven from Casterly Rock, my lord. Tywin Lannister sends his regards." And his warning. Walder snapped the scroll open and read in silence, "The North is not yet won, but if left to their grief, they may turn it into glory. We must crush them again, but wisely this time. Let their pride be their leash. Let Winterfell be their grave." Walder clenched his jaw. "Tywin wants patience. I want vengeance." Black Walder stepped forward. "We should send riders north, assassins, poison their cups and their camps. A war fought in shadows." Reman banged his fist on the table. "No, we ride with an army. Burn their keeps like they burned the Dreadfort. Show them what real betrayal tastes like." Walder shook his head. No. The wolves are smarter now. They killed Rose before the feast, before he could strike. They've learned." He tapped the map on the table. "We need someone close. Someone they won't suspect." He looked at his sons. "Send word to the Karstarks. There's still bitterness in that blood. And send another raven to King's Landing, if Queen Cersei still has ears for northern games." Meanwhile, far away, in King's Landing, Queen Regent Cersei Lannister sat with her wine untouched for once. The news had reached her before the raven even arrived, whispered by spies paid in gold and secrets. Her son, King Tommen, sat on the Iron Throne, blissfully unaware of the power games swirling around him. But Cersei was listening. "So," she murmured, gazing out over the city from her balcony, "the North rises again." Her uncle Kevin stood at her side. Robb Stark was supposed to be a fading memory. Now the Freys are panicking, and the North is talking about unity. "And Jon Snow," she said, her lips curling. "The bastard. Ned Stark's little shadow. Alive and sharper than expected." Kevin frowned. "The Night's Watch won't like him leaving," Cersei shrugged. "They'll forget their vows the moment winter falls harder." "Bastards have always been slippery." Kevin leaned in. "Do we act now, or wait for the Freys to make a mess of it?" Cersei sipped her wine slowly. "Let the Freys scramble like rats in fire. If they kill the Starks, we win. If they die trying, we still win. And if the North wins again?" She smiled coldly. "Then we send them another gift. Something to remind them that wolves, no matter how loud they howl, still bleed." Back in the North, unaware of the southern whispers, Jon Snow stood in the cold courtyard of Moat Cailin, overseeing repairs to the ancient stronghold. Robb had sent him ahead, knowing that if the South tried to march again, Moat Cailin would be their first test. The place still stank of damp stone and broken promises, but Jon saw potential in its walls. Defensive high ground, narrow paths, perfect for bleeding out an invading army. A rider galloped in from the east, a Karstark scout. Jon walked over, cloak billowing behind him. The scout dismounted, panting. "My lord." "Riders spotted near the shivering forest?" "Sigils unknown, but they're not Northmen." Jon's face darkened. "Lannister." The man shook his head. "No banners. Could be Frey, could be worse." Jon turned toward Ghost, who stood watching the woods. The bastard of Winterfell had learned something from Ramsay after all. Don't wait for the knife. Smell it before it strikes. He looked toward the south, where snow clouds were gathering like an omen. "The war's not over," he whispered, "and this time the wolves would be ready." Snow fell heavier as the final curtain of war drew near. The North was colder than ever, but not just from weather. It was the silence before the next storm. Every village, every watchtower, every pass was on high alert. At Moat Cailin, Jon stood beneath the rising banners of House Stark, sharpening Longclaw as the fires crackled behind him. His breath misted in the cold air, but his eyes burned with focus. Robb had returned to Winterfell to gather strength. Jon stayed behind to hold the gate of the North, the only narrow pass through the swamps where the South could march. If the Freys or Lannisters wanted blood, they'd have to crawl through the mire first, and Jon was ready to drown them in it. That night, a raven came from Carhold. Jon read the message by firelight, his face hardening. "Karstark men ride under Frey gold. 40 riders cross the shivering forest under false flags. They hunt for Robb." Jon stood abruptly, so it was true. Rickard Karstark's bitterness had outlived his death. His kin, furious at Robb for executing him during the war, had aligned themselves with the Freys, and now they wanted revenge. Jon turned to the nearest captain. "Send word to Winterfell. Robb's in danger. Prepare to ride at dawn. At Winterfell, Robb Stark stood in the great hall, once again surrounded by the lords of the north. The scars on his face had faded, but the weight in his eyes had only grown. He wore dark leathers now, not the golden armor of a southern king. He had learned what crowns cost. Lady Maege Mormont slammed her fist against the long table. "Karstarks ride with fries. I say we send their heads back in barrels." Lord Wyman Manderley nodded grimly. "They've broken faith." "Just like the Boltons," Robb raised a hand. "Not all Karstarks. Some remained loyal. We punished traitors, not bloodlines." But even as he said it, he knew this war would spill more family blood than any before. Just then, a scout burst into the hall, mud on his boots and panic in his eyes. "My lord." "Riders at the Wolfswood. No banners. 40 strong." Robb's knuckles went white around the hilt of his sword. He knew what this was. They weren't raiders, they were coming for his head. The battle began at twilight. The woods echoed with hooves, steel, and shouted names. Robb rode at the front of his small escort, grey wind at his side. Arrows hissed past him, cutting through the mist. One struck a man behind him. The rider fell without a scream. The Karstark Fry assassins emerged from the trees like phantoms, blades glinting red. They didn't want a battle. They wanted a murder, but Robb Stark didn't run anymore. Grey Wind leapt first, tackling a horse and tearing out the throat of the rider before they could strike. Robb ducked an axe swing, retaliating with a clean strike to the man's ribs. He turned, slashing another down, but more came. 5, 6, 7 riders surrounded him. It would have ended there. But then Jon Snow arrived. A howl echoed through the woods, Ghost's war cry, and suddenly the trees exploded with northern steel. Jon led a flank from Moat Cailin, his blade flashing silver under the dying light. He rode through the enemy like a storm, Longclaw cutting 2 men down in one swing. "With me," he roared, "for the king in the north." The traitors tried to retreat, but the forest had closed around them. It ended in minutes. When it was over, the snow was red again, and Robb sat slumped on his horse. Wounded but alive, Jon reached him panting, bleeding from a cut near his brow. "You look like hell," Robb muttered. Trying to smile. "You look worse," Jon replied. They laughed. That night, the fires burned in the Wolfswood, warming the last of the loyal men who had survived. The corpses of Karstark turncloaks were stacked and burned with no ceremony, no songs. Just smoke. Robb sat beside Jon near the flames. "This was the last move, wasn't it?" Robb asked. "The South threw everything they had left." Jon nodded slowly. "They tried shadows, knives, betrayal, but they forgot one thing." "What's that?" Jon stared at the fire. "The North doesn't forget." And this time, the North didn't forgive. They sat in silence for a long while, 2 brothers who had seen too much and bled too deeply. No crowns, no banners. Just Stark, still standing. At dawn, ravens flew from Winterfell, messages to every corner of the realm. The Dreadfort is ash. The Boltons are no more. The Karstarks are disarmed. Robb Stark rules, and Jon Snow stands beside him. From Dragonstone to dawn, men read the letters and whispered the same thing. The North has risen, and this time it would not fall.